Welcome back to the Saturday Scholars College Football Podcast. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. That is Gonzo. That is Zan. I am Shub. And today we are here to do week 5 recap. Let's go. Another great week in the sport of college football. Fellas, we're approaching the halfway point on the year. It has flown by already. And we've got 5 games in the book so far, 5 data points for most teams. So good enough sample size to where I think we're starting to get a good picture of who's legit, who's not. Some teams, cough, cough, Michigan, we have to wait a while to see if you're actually legit or not because of that schedule. But there's some other teams that are starting to play some good opponents, and we're starting to really see how the dominoes are falling early on this year. So, fellas, one thing before we start. One, Zan, we missed you last week. Glad to have you back. He took the bye week just like his Oklahoma State Cowboys. And just want to shout out my Miami Marlins for making the playoffs. First time since 2003. I'm a very happy camper. I'm a diehard. I watch at least 100 games a year. So my first time getting to experience that, which is really sad. But at the same time, I'm elated by it. So shout out to the Marlins. Had to rep them here.
Well, I get fellas, a Shuby snack?
I'll give a Shuby snack to the Marlins. I'll give a fake Shuby snack to the Marlins because we gotta protect the sanctity of Shuby snacks because it is a college football pod. But anyhow, yeah, guys, it was not a good week. Other than baseball, other sports, it was a good week. As far as college football, though, not a good week for our respective favorite teams. We're gonna get into that here in a second. Well, fellas, where do you want to start off? Gonzo, do we want to rip the Band-Aid off first, or do we want to go somewhere else?
Actually, I'll get the Band-Aid out of the way. LSU, Ole Miss, man, that just sucked. You know, they wasted an absolute great performance from Jaden Daniels and Brian Thomas catching 3 touchdowns, and Malik Neighbors going over 100 yards, and they just couldn't stop anything. And it was just a really, really tough loss because it's not that Ole Miss is any more talented than LSU. The fact of the matter is that Lane was able to be creative enough, and LSU just cannot cover, cannot tackle, and I would be shocked if Matt House is still a defensive coordinator next season.
This was a phenomenal game to watch, I'll tell you that. If you're an Ole Miss fan, first of all, congrats to Ole Miss because we doubted you. All 3 of us had LSU. We all kind of liked LSU in that spot, to be honest. It was kind of a surprising win. I thought after the Bama loss, Jackson Dart looked pretty banged up. So I was pleasantly surprised to see Jackson Dart really have a phenomenal game. And yeah, this was the Ole Miss offense that we all expected. It didn't show up against Alabama, but it really showed up against LSU. And what a fourth quarter, I'll tell you that. I mean, I believe it was early in the fourth quarter, LSU had that 2-score lead. They had that one lull in the game where they got to stop, and they had the 2-point lead, and it looked like LSU was about to pull away, but then the tide turned pretty quickly, and Ole Miss got the final 2 scores, and that was ultimately the difference in the game. The final play of the game as well. I mean, Jaden Daniels, man, he had some time. The ball just sailed out of the back of the end zone.
It's just a shame, he's had a Heisman-esque campaign so far. I mean, 414 passing yards, 4 touchdowns, but because he's going to play on an 8-4 LSU team, you know, everyone will be like, "Oh, that's nice." So it's just a shame to waste this kind of offense because when you can put up 49 points in SEC play and be a top offense in college football, it's just a shame when you have a defense that's going to give up 50 consistently.
Jaden Daniels and Jackson Dart.
2015 Big 12 game right there.
Yes. What was that, Shub?
Jaden Daniels and Jackson Dart had nearly identical stat lines. 27 to 36, 414, 4 touchdowns, no picks. 26 to 39, 389, 4 touchdowns, no picks. Identical QBRs. I mean, this was a phenomenal quarterback game.
This is the most yardage allowed in school history. Shocker. Who would have thought that 700 plus yards allowed would be a school record or anything? And the fact they got Quinshon Judkins got it going, 177 yards and a touchdown on the ground. Of course, he finally breaks out against LSU. So, hey, good for Ole Miss. You bounced back from a tough loss against Alabama and won a big game at home against a rival who's, for the most part, dominated this rivalry when LSU's got their heads on straight. So they're still alive for the West. Some things can fall their way for Ole Miss. I mean, and LSU is too, but very deflating loss. Very.
Well, two things before we move on. One, Gonzo, I am sorry to tell you that the post-game win expectancy had LSU favored 68% of the time. LSU had a big success rate advantage of 62% to just 49%, which really isn't that good. So, I mean, if you replay this game, I still think LSU would have a good shot to win. But, of course, you know, the game is played for a reason. It's the one game that happened. And that's a tough loss. Were we too quick to just kind of write off Ole Miss for the SEC West? Or do you think that it's still Bama, A&M, still LSU maybe?
Ole Miss is quality. I don't think you can completely write them off just yet. They're that wild card in that division that can just maybe sneak up on you. A&M looks a lot better this year, but I mean, truly, I mean, LSU doesn't look as good as we thought. Alabama's not as good as we thought, although Alabama has adapted a little bit and played some better defense. Ole Miss last week being evidence of that. So the West is kind of open. The West is absolutely open right now. So,
which is great for a general college football fan's perspective. Like, it's usually that division, you already know who's going to win it every year. It's nice to actually be like, wow, we don't know who's going to win it. So it'll be fun. Bama A&M this week, by the way. Well, what do we want to go to next?
Got to go to your Gators, don't we?
Yeah,
we're ripping off Gonzo's Band-Aid. Let's rip off. Well, let's rip off your Band-Aid and rip off Gonzo's second Band-Aid.
Ray Davis. I'll never forget that name, man.
Yeah. All right. Let's start by this. I'll give Ray Davis a Shuby snack. I mean, he deserves one. When you go 26 for 280 yards and 3 touchdowns, and then you also have a receiving touchdown. I mean, Christian McCaffrey did it today in the NFL. Ray Davis did it in college on Saturday against the Florida Gators. And as a Gator fan, all I want to say is I picked Florida to win this game. I trusted Florida to go in there and win. Kentucky, by far, easily the better team. Kentucky, I think for the first 4 weeks of the season, we were saying how they didn't look that good. We were saying Kentucky looks kind of fraudulent because they're kind of half-assing against bad teams like EKU and whoever else they played, Vandy. Well, I think Kentucky was playing possum. I think they were playing possum because they definitely did not show everything on tape, and then they just brought it to Florida, and oh my God, the physicality defense, like Florida looked like they've never seen a physical team like that before. Kentucky completely dominated Florida in the trenches. It was like not even close. It was like watching a high school team out there. And Ray Davis is him, like insane. I mean, Kentucky's got a good team on their hands, and it's crazy that Devin Leary is like not been that good. Devin Leary has been honestly kind of awful. And that doesn't matter because the quarterback play isn't really needed when you can bully a team and rush for 300 yards.
If I told you, you guys as Florida fans, if I told you Devin Leary would go 9 of 19 for 69 yards with 1 touchdown, you'd think, okay, we won by a lot.
Yeah.
But I actually have a little rebuttal. I still think Kentucky is a little bit of snake oil. I still think they're a little overrated. I think they just play really well against Florida every year. I think Florida's their Super Bowl. And I think Florida in themselves is really inconsistent. Yeah, I don't really know what to think about the Florida Gators. You don't know what you're going to get every week with the Florida Gators. But, I mean, when you look at how poor Devin Leary has been playing, if Ray Davis isn't having a great day, the Kentucky Wildcats are not having a great day. It's very one-dimensional. So anyone who has a good defensive line or a good run defense is going to be pretty formidable against Kentucky. And that's a lot of people in the SEC. So I still think there's a little bit of snake oil in there. But, hey, they won everyone that they've played against. So hats off to them. You can only play who's in front of you.
I think those are
funny you mentioned
points.
Christian McCaffrey because Kentucky did take the San Francisco approach of here's our stud running back and here's our defense, and we're kind of just going to sell it quarterback and win that way. I don't have enough vitriol to make this a grudge, but Austin Armstrong, like, dude, you're this touted defensive coordinator. Did it never occur to you at all at halftime to be like, let's key on Ray Davis and make Devin Leary beat us? I mean, what are you doing? Like, this reminds me of when Tyrion Davis-Price did this for LSU against UF a couple years ago. It's like, if you're getting gashed by a guy, stack the box and make their mid quarterback beat you with the arm. I wish I got paid six figures to make no adjustments for 4 quarters. Actually, forget it. Screw it. You do get a Gonzo grudge, Austin Armstrong, because that's just terrible coaching.
6 figures to be a horrible coach. That's the entire Oklahoma State coaching staff. So I can relate.
Well, Kentucky's won 3 in a row against Florida now, by the way. Kentucky had to hear about that 30-year win streak for so long. Now they have a 3-game win streak against Florida. So, yeah, the tide is turning.
That venue and the noon game is UF's biggest enemy. If Florida has to go play a road game at noon, the boys just aren't into it. And you could say that's coaching. It's just 12 p.m. games are ripe for disappointment, unfortunately.
You guys pull up Kentucky's schedule. Look at the rest of Kentucky's schedule. It's getting real quick for them. How many more wins do you see on that schedule?
Let me pull that up real quick.
Can you just read me the schedule? I don't have it pulled up.
So I like that. Yeah. What we got? Shoot.
At Georgia, Missouri, Tennessee, at Miss State, Alabama, at South Carolina, at Louisville.
They could lose 4 of their next 5.
It could come down real quick. But I mean, they got 5 wins in the bank
last year.
5-0.
Remember, Syracuse 6-0 last year, and then what? They finished 6-6. So I mean, this could be one of those situations where you just get full on light food and then dinner served.
Yeah, I kind of. But one final point here before we move on. I think I agree with Zan's point about it could be a little snake oil because I mean Devin Leary is not playing well at all. When they play Georgia and Tennessee and teams that are going to score more points on them, that's going to get exposed. Because you can only run the ball so well. If your quarterback is playing doo-doo, your ceiling's capped. So I kind of agree. But hey, if you're a Kentucky fan, enjoy it, man. 5-0, that's phenomenal.
So
beat the crap out of Florida.
We've been talking about. Let's talk about Georgia. Hey, maybe they'll cover against Kentucky next week. Who knows at this point? Thank God, Brock Bowers is a Georgia Bulldog because they were. I don't want to call it sleepwalking. They just did not come ready to go in a rivalry game, and Hugh Freeze almost worked that magic. Man, I really thought they had a chance to win that game. The Auburn Tigers, that is.
Georgia's just not what we thought they were this year. I mean, they're winning their games, but I mean, they're kind of fortunate that the SEC is still solid, but the SEC as a whole is kind of down. Also, everyone is kind of down this year except for the Pac-12, really. Mm-hmm. And so it's really interesting to see that. Actually, I'd say the ACC and the Pac-12 are having good years, and everyone else is a little down to their standard from what we normally see from them. But I don't know, man. I just don't think Georgia is the team that we thought. I preseason, I thought a three-peat with that schedule and everything was just right there in the cards, so easy to pull off. But right now, I don't think that they can get past maybe Ohio State. Even Michigan with their cakewalk schedule, they're going to be really well rested. They're not going to have any attrition, no anything when they go to the playoffs. So it'll be interesting.
Do we think Georgia loses? Are they guaranteed to lose a game? Are they guaranteed to lose a game, or do you think they can still go 12-0 and right the ship? Because the schedule is still, weaker.
I think they can still go 12-0. They have enough talent, even though they haven't been playing well. But the SEC championship game is where it gets a little dicey.
Yeah.
So we'll see.
But I'm with Zan. I think they can go 12-0 because when you're just that talented, a 5-star playing at 60%, unfortunately, is more often than not still going to be much better than a 3-star giving his all. Unfortunately. Now, every now and then, that is wrong. But usually when you have talent like this, you can afford to have these kind of starts, games, performances, and still win.
All right, let me ask you guys this. This is the money question.
Okay.
If you were to park Georgia in the Pac-12 this year, and you were to have this Georgia team go and play the Pac-12 schedule this year, how many games does Georgia lose?
2 or 3.
I'll go on record saying that I think Washington and Oregon could beat this Georgia team. USC would be a toss-up, but I'm confident I would pick Washington or Oregon to beat Georgia right now.
I agree. I wish we could see that, but of course that's fantasy land. Well, how about Notre Dame and Duke? Notre Dame and Duke, man. It was man is the right word. I feel so bad for Duke right now.
Heartbreaking for Duke.
Listen, Notre Dame was the one that had their hearts ripped out the week before, so they kind of dished it back out against Duke this time around. Duke had that in the bag. Like, I don't know if you guys watched this one. I watched most of it, the fourth quarter especially.
Mm-hmm.
Third, what was it? 4th down and 16 at around the 50 line. And
then Hartman runs for a first.
Yeah, which Sam Hartman was phenomenal down the stretch, by the way. He really was, but that's just crushing. And then Riley Leonard now has a high ankle sprain that came out today. He was diagnosed with that. So I don't know how many weeks.
It's probably out for a couple weeks. Yeah.
Oh, that's crushing, man. That's just crushing for Duke. They played so well too.
That would have essentially secured the 10-win bold prediction, barring just wacky stuff. And it's crazy how something like no one outside of like us in these two fan bases, and I guess some other diehard fans, will remember that 4th and 16 rush that, essentially nuked this prediction. Because I'm looking at the schedule. So you do get to rest up at least, but NC State, they'll drag you into the mud even at home. At FSU, unless FSU is napping, that's a loss. At Louisville, toss up. I think you can beat Wake. At UNC, that's another toss up, but it's on the road. You beat Virginia, you beat Pitt. So
without Riley Leonard, things get really complicated.
Oh, yeah.
He's very one-dimensional.
I said that on win totals too. I said they're going to go as far as Riley goes. And I hate to see that kind of manifesting where now he's hurt. And I can't even name you their backup. So
I can name you him because I just pulled it up. Their backup is redshirt freshman Henry Bellin IV.
Wow, that's
I don't know who that is.
Very Duke name.
And then the third string is a true freshman, Grayson Loftus.
Again, another Duke name.
So yeah, that's just by the names alone, it's not looking too good for Duke.
But they can still do a lot of good things. This isn't a conference loss. You still got a big matchup with FSU that is going to mean something. So they still have a lot to play for. I mean, let's be real. We all knew Duke was never going to play for a natty, but you could still finish this year with a 9-win team and maybe sneak into a New Year's Six bowl. So if we're Duke, this sucks, but you still have a lot to be excited about and anticipate moving forward.
That's a good point. For some reason, it didn't cross my mind that was not a conference game. So they don't take a loss in the ACC standings. They're still good to go. They're still in great shape for the ACC.
Let me ask you this. Does Duke really have a lot to look forward to past this season? Because Michigan State's eyeing Mike Elko.
You had to bring it up. You had to bring it up.
Oh my gosh.
I mean,
talk about just getting your heart absolutely ripped out. Because it's one thing to lose one game, but to lose your future and that would just be.
This is going to be the norm. We're going to see Big Ten and SEC teams just taking everyone's future from them, basically.
Yeah, I mean, if you're a college football fan and you're a Duke fan, like you understand, like this was bound to happen. But I mean, just enjoy it while it lasts. That's all you got to say. But yeah, It sucks, but it's the way it works. And before we move on, I just want to say Notre Dame. I think we're at a little buy low point on Notre Dame because I look at the rest of their schedule. They have a Louisville team who's ranked now that I think Louisville's kind of overrated. I think they're way better than Louisville.
The state of Kentucky is a snake oil state. That's their number one export.
It's no longer the bluegrass state; it's the snake oil state.
Exactly. Their number one export is snake oil. Like Louisville beat NC State, sure, but NC State isn't that good. I know they're 3-2, but they're really not that good of a team. Like I've watched 3 NC State games this year and have never been impressed by what they put on the field. I always feel like everything they do is hard for them, even when they win. Like nothing is done easily for them. So I don't think NC State's a quality team. I think they might make a bowl game. I think they might go 6-6, but I don't know. Louisville has not played anyone yet.
Yeah, Louisville couldn't run the ball at all against NC State. Plummer really struggled. I mean, he struggled badly. 2 picks, 36 QBR. Yeah, I agree with you. I think Louisville's played a very weak schedule. So
that's the only reason their win total is so high. They don't play anybody.
Yeah, but they are 5-0. So, but they got Notre Dame this week. So I see, not to show my hand, but I feel like we all know where we're going on that spread. I like Notre Dame a lot in that spot. But anyways, All right. Well, we've knocked out a little bit of ACC here.
Well, let's keep it in the ACC real quick because we were talking about some implications with that. I mean, Clemson goes off and they beat Syracuse, give the Orange their first loss, 31-14. I think we're all over that. I think we picked Clemson both ways.
Y'all know the spread. I thought Syracuse would keep this close, and yeah, that's an L. But we were right about Clemson bouncing back to win the game straight up, and that's big for them. Sorry, Zan.
No. Like, and that's really big for Clemson. Yes, you're right. But they're 3-2 now. 3-2, Clemson. How often do you hear that? Like, they're definitely in a down year as well. So this is kind of exciting because the ACC might have a new winner this year. The SEC might have a new winner this year. The Pac-12 might have a new winner this year. The Big 12 might have a new winner this year, but not the one that you want to see. But yeah, it's a really exciting year for college football in terms of parity, as in we are like legitimately, I never thought we'd see this kind of parity ever again in college football, and enjoy it now because I think it's only going to get worse in the future. So
I think Syracuse played a little bit better than the final score suggested, by the way, but in that Clemson game, because they did turn the ball over 3 times. 2 of them were fumbles that really gifted Clemson like easy scoring drives. But I mean, Clemson was still the better team out of the day at the end of the day. But I agree with you. I mean, I also think this is a buy low point on Clemson. I mean, Clemson's still like a power rated. They're like a top 15 team, right? Like they're still going to be favored over most, I think, the rest of their schedule.
I mean, I agree. No one's going to know the nuance of the Duke game where Clemson just had the most horrific turnovers you could have in the red zone, or the FSU game where literally their programming major kicker unfortunately missed a 20-yarder. I mean, so this easily could be an undefeated Clemson team right now.
Well, actually, I take that back because I just saw the rest of their schedule. They got to go at Miami, and then they got Notre Dame. So actually, I don't know if they're going to be favored in those games. Yeah. I take that back.
Speaking of a team that could be undefeated, but in the opposite direction, and is undefeated in the opposite direction, Virginia. They lose to Boston College. And hey, I just wanted to bring that one up real quick because that was a really we were all over Virginia being one of the worst teams in all of college football this year. It was between Virginia and Stanford, and right now it's looking like Virginia is winning the cake. So, yeah, man, Tony Elliott, Tennessee's calling him, right? Tennessee wants him to be the head coach.
I had said give him a grace period because of the shooting, and I'm kind of gonna back off that stance.
Yeah, but that happened in like the last 2 weeks of the season.
That's what I'm saying. Like, I'm off that stance. Like, this is atrocious. Like, you need to can him and start this over. I mean, it's not working. And I thought they should have played the Calandra kid over Musket. And I get he was supposed to be this prize from Monmouth, but man, I mean, Virginia could be looking at some history. I don't know what other FCS teams are on the opponent or on the schedule more so as opponents, but yes, you.
So I looked at the rest of Virginia's schedule, and I'm like, all right, are they going to get that win? Because they're 0-5, obviously. They play William and Mary this week.
Oh, give me the Tribe.
William and Mary they're not the best FCS team, but they are definitely one of the better FCS teams. Like they
should win that game. If they can't win that game, shut down the program.
Let me see. Quick math here. Virginia's oh boy. I mean, I don't know. Boys, I don't know about this. Virginia power rated on Sagarin right now, they're 103rd. So they're 103rd. Okay. William and Mary is an FCS team, but if you account for combining FCS and FCS, William and Mary would be 144th.
Okay.
So it's number 103 versus number 144, and that gap I think is like an 8-point power rating gap. So like it's probably like a spread that's only like 10 points or something like that, if I had to guess.
Give me the
like it's a losable like it's if Virginia turns the ball over and sucks, like they might lose.
Hey,
that's crazy.
Just saying.
It's not the same as William and Mary, but we did see Georgia Tech lose the Bowling Green. So unfortunately, the ACC is prime for some of these. Just like Boston College almost lost the Holy Cross, for goodness sake.
Yep.
Let's round out the ACC real quick while we're on it. Virginia Tech. Giving me some hope for my overplay by beating Pitt. Hey, let's go ahead and message that one guy who told us, Pitt wouldn't go 1-1 versus the Big 12. They are now 1-4 on the season. Pitt Panthers, and we also said Pitt Panthers 6-6 at best, right?
Yep.
Man, we were being generous. We were being generous, but all right. I just wanted to take a little victory lap there. Okay. No, we don't need to spend too much time on that game. There's a lot of other really big games
Yeah, I don't think Pitt's making a bowl
talk
game. I don't
about.
even have to look at their schedule.
Oh no, they're not making a bowl game.
Oh
They're so
man.
bad.
Yeah, but yeah, Bowling Green blowing out Georgia Tech. That Jesus, good Lord, man. Just
Yeah.
want to shout that out.
Yeah.
The bottom of
While
the
we're on the
ACC
topic.
is just so bad. Like the top of the league is better this year, but the bottom of the ACC is still terrible. Like,
And that's normal.
Like we
Yeah,
expected.
exactly. Yeah. Well, all right. Well, how about that? Before we mention some other big time games this week, we're talking about William and Mary covering the spread versus Virginia. So that's what the Saturday Scholars is all about right there. The William and Mary tribe get mentioned before some of these other teams. If we want to shift conferences here, I say we go into the Pac-12. Let's go out west and cover the conference that's been a pleasant surprise this year. Utah and Oregon State. We got to
best
mention this
all-around
game.
conference this season.
Friday, yeah. This was a Friday night game. Gonzo and I liked Oregon State in this one. Zan, I know you weren't here. You had Utah. I really liked Oregon State in this spot because they were at home coming off a loss. And, of course, Utah still is just – Cam Rising is basically saying, like, yeah, I might play every week. I'm not going to play, but I might tell everyone I might play, but I'm really not.
Utah sold me on how they've been able to continually keep winning despite being in such adverse positions. And so I was thinking, you know what? After seeing how Oregon State played the last week, I know they're still a quality team, but I can totally see Utah going in there and finding a way. That's what they've been doing all year. And that's why I chose Utah. But, early in that game, it was clear. It was very clear. Even though it was only 7-0 for the longest time in that game, it was pretty clear that Oregon State was going to win that game. Utah could not get anything going. The quarterback play was terrible. Outright dreadful. So good job, Oregon State. I think they could win 10 games this year, 9-3 or 10-2. I mean, they're a very solid squad. Really looking forward to seeing how their season pans out. Utah, we'll see. If Cam Rising doesn't come back, that under 8.5 is still in play. I'll say that much.
I think the thing with Utah is if you look at their splits as home versus away, I don't know if there's another team in the country that looks way better at home and has a huge drop off on the road. Like you have to manually downgrade Utah in your mind whenever they're playing an away game. That's like the difference in how they play home versus away.
Think about how they played Baylor, and Baylor's trash this year.
Right, exactly. But then home games, they take out Florida by multiple scores and they beat UCLA. And UCLA is not a pushover team by any means. And keep in mind, like, Utah has been doing all this with like a freshman quarterback that was the third string on the roster. So like, let's keep in mind here, like this is Utah without their best players and they still are 4-1. Like if you're a Utah fan, I feel like this is still a success. Like you've been doing this without Rising the whole time. I mean,
absolutely.
I still think they're in it. You get Rising back 100%. In there. Yeah. But as far as Oregon State, yeah, I don't know how the schedules are pulled up, but I think Oregon State sort of gets like a little bit of a break before they start playing some better teams.
That's much needed.
Well, sort of. They got Cal, UCLA, Arizona, Colorado, Stanford next. So that is kind of a break. And that UCLA game is at home. So if they take care of business and beat the teams they should beat, Oregon State, you're right, Zan, they should be, what would that be, 9-1 going into the Washington game. Which is at home. They got Washington.
That's perfect. As someone who took over 8.5, that's what I'm talking about right there.
I think we all took the over on that one.
I think we're all building the dam. No, I mean, what Jonathan Swift's done out there is incredible. How they won that game was just amazing. Just great defensive performance. And you did what you were supposed to do against freshman quarterbacks. And like y'all were saying, it's a testament to Kyle Whittingham that he has been able to win playing basically as Iowa West. It's not as bad as Iowa, but it's in that similar schematic regime of defense. Every now and then we'll score, but defense will take care of everything.
And I really do think that Oregon State has, I think Aiden Childs is like not, from everything I've heard is that Aiden Childs is like not that big of a drop off from DJU.
They were playing him.
Yeah, they kind of have that insurance at quarterback too.
They're trying to develop him. That's a little smart. They're playing him a little bit this year to get him a little ready for next year. So, yeah, really like it. Really well coached team. But
I'm
let's
liking it.
move on. Let's not get too bogged down on one Pac-12 game. There's a lot of games to cover here. USC, Colorado started off as a complete, assault and then turned into an actual fight. 48-41. Really good game for Caleb Williams. Let's face it, he's going to win the freaking Heisman. I mean, there's no one else in his stratosphere right now. Even Michael Penix didn't even throw a touchdown this week, although he had a great game.
Man.
But hey, I feel bad for Shadur Sanders. I want to mention this because Shadur Sanders through 5 games. How many times has he been sacked, guys?
Oh,
I
I
don't
bet
wanna
like
know.
25.
It's 25 exactly. And he is the most sacked quarterback in all of FBS. He's getting sacked at least 5 times a game.
The problem with Colorado, and I know this has been brought up before, but it's a great point, and I've heard other people bring this up. Colorado, like everybody knows that Colorado is getting there. Of course, they see all the hype. They know that there's a large audience of people that don't generally watch college football that are watching Colorado every week. And so every time those teams play Colorado, they know that there's going to be a lot of eyeballs on them. And like they get up for that game and they know that. So like the great point here is like if you're Georgia or Alabama, you get everybody's like, fastball every week. You get everybody's best game. But those rosters are like have 5 stars all over them, so they are built to sustain and fend off everybody's best efforts against them. If you go to Colorado, that roster
Colorado's
is not
pretty
built.
skilled. Colorado's pretty skilled at the skill positions, but the problem is their trench positions, their offensive line, defensive line, they could use a lot of improvement there because that's where they're losing a lot of their battles.
Yes, and the point is like that roster is not meant to handle getting everybody's best game and everybody playing their A game against them. But I will say this, listen, again, I took USC on the spread. One, I think USC's defense, it is what it is. It is just not good. Like it hasn't improved that much from last year. That's pretty evident. And if you're Colorado, I think you got to be extremely happy that you fought and made that a 1-score game. Like that's a good sign.
And if you're Mike Gundy, you got to enjoy watching Mason Cobb get 13 tackles in this game. So, yeah. But, you can just replace him with the portal players. Same thing as long as they've experience.
A lot of former Oklahoma State players all over the league having success.
Yep. John Paul Richardson had a great week. Stephon Johnson had a good week. Yeah.
So
Jabbar Muhammad.
I want you guys to rank the Pac-12 teams. Rank the top 4 Pac-12 teams you think right now. Like who are the best 4 teams right now in the Pac-12?
Washington 1, Oregon 2, USC 3, Oregon State 4.
I would say, for me, I'll flip them. I'll have Oregon 1 because even though Texas Tech is kind of a trending dumpster fire, that was a tough road win. And Washington is number 2. I just want to see them play equal-ish caliber team. Then I'd put USC because there's no defense. And then, build the dam. Oregon State. Utah's just on the outside looking in for me as well.
So I'm going to have USC, or sorry, not USC. What am I saying? I'm going to have Oregon 1A, Washington 1B. So that's kind of how I would say it. But those are 1 and 2. And then I think I'm going to put Oregon State 3. And I'm going to have I would put Utah, USC, and Washington State in like a 3-way tie for that 4th spot. If I could play it out the way I would want to, because USC's defense is not that good, guys. Like it's going to hold it back. Wazoo is being criminally underrated right now. And I think after what you saw Oregon State do to Utah, how much better does that make Washington State look? Because we're still saying Oregon State's like a 10-win team.
I can't believe nobody's talking about Cam Ward. I really cannot. I see all these shows and even podcasts that I like, and not a soul is mentioning him. And it's like, what is it going to take? What win do y'all need to see for him to be here? Because kind of like I think of Robert Griffin, like nobody seemed to care till he beat OU. And so I guess
that's what it's going to take. He's going to have to beat USC.
well, except he doesn't get that opportunity. But I guess it'll have to be Oregon on October 21st. If they go in Autzen and win that game, that will be a sign to the national media. And again, we will have known for 8 months, the 3 of us, but that'll signal everyone that Cam Ward has arrived, and we got to start taking this man serious. And
Maybe
I hope for
the
him.
national media is kind of stupid, man. I feel like the national media will be like,
That's
"Oh, but
true.
it wasn't USC. You didn't beat Caleb Williams. You're not that good."
I mean, to be fair, we were on Cam Ward. If you guys listened to us last year, we were on Cam Ward. We were just a little bit early on him, just a little bit early. But like, this is kind of what we were saying was potentially there. We already talked a lot of Pac-12.
Washington completely struggled.
They did
against Arizona.
Yeah,
Arizona had them figured out, man. Like Washington was not able to just march it down their throats the whole game. And Arizona's figured some way out to slow them down.
Arizona didn't have Delora either. Arizona had Noah Fafita, who's still he's a decent backup, but they didn't even have Jaden Delora play that game.
No, this guy, their backup played really well. He had 27 for 39, 232 yards, 3 touchdowns, 1 pick. Pretty solid.
He's still a good player. Yeah, Washington's defense is still suspect. I still think it's a lot better than last year. I don't think it's quite as bad as USC's, but Washington's defense is still like not a top 30-ish defense, I don't think. So we'll see. Well, I just can't wait for all these good teams to start playing each other. Like, I can't wait.
Oh, we're about to get in 2 weeks with them. I'm very excited for that game.
Shout out to Cal barely beating Arizona State. Arizona State's finally like showing signs of life. They just keep losing. But Arizona State looked like a dead team against Fresno, and then they're finally looking better. Cal is quietly,
by the record, they're still a dead team. They're not making a bowl game this year, but yeah. Cal, hey, what about Oregon? 42-6 Stanford. Stanford was up 6-0 in that game, and then Oregon started trying.
That took me back to 2020 when was it 2020? Wait, I mean when Stanford had or 2021, one of the two, where Stanford upset Oregon, and it was just like, what in the world is going on? And I was like, what are we doing, Oregon? But then they leaned up in the chair, and it was never in doubt after that. 4 touchdowns for Bo Nix, keeping that Heisman campaign.
And I was sitting here complaining, like, because our player draft, I'm like, he has no touchdowns, Bo Nix, screw you. And then he throws 4.
He heard you.
It was the classic controller meme where the guy sits up in the controller and sits up in the chair. That was Oregon. Well,
where you guys want to go next?
Do we want to go into the Big 10 or the Big 12?
Either or. Let's go ahead and go into the Big 12 because I do want to bring something up, and this is a Zanny bar right here. UCF. UCF
that's a grudge too. Yeah.
Was beating Baylor 35-7 with like going into the fourth quarter basically, and lost 36-35. How is that even possible? I know John Reese Plumlee wasn't playing that game, but how do you give up that many freaking points to Baylor in one quarter and lose the game? It's insane. And UCF had a chance to win this game with a walk-off field goal, but they shanked the shit out of it. And
man.
And yeah, man. So rough start for UCF in the Big 12, 0-2. And I got to say, you know, a lot of that probably has to do with JRP not being there. They're a much different team with JRP, but man, UCF fans, they're getting some humble pie right now.
Stole my line, man. I think they needed a little bit of humble pie, if I'm going to be honest, but yeah, they are getting it. Yeah, according to ESPN, FPI, Baylor was down 35-10 go late in the third quarter, I think. And there was this one point in time where FBI said UCF had a 99.9% chance of winning. They were 35-10 with like a minute left in the third quarter. Oof, that is just brutal.
I'm so happy I didn't see this in real time. I mean, I had written this off.
The talk on Twitter was, is Dave Aranda going to get fired? Like, is the seat starting to boil a little bit for Dave Aranda? That was the talk. Like, at halftime, it was like, geez, good Lord, Baylor. So that turned pretty quickly. That's going to get turned down a little bit, at least for another week.
I cannot wait to tomorrow at work to watch the highlights of this and just be like, what in the world? I mean, that can't happen. I mean, and Gus is a seasoned veteran. I mean, to lose like this, and it's not like Baylor's this offensive juggernaut. I mean, they're essentially a dead team walking for the most part. And I mean, this really would have solidified it. But
to be fair, Baylor did get Shapen back this week. Not that he has been great by any means, but that was at least like a little bit of an upgrade for Baylor. But to your point, UCF still went to this game favored. So like Vegas still said UCF should have been the better team in this game. And I mean, they really should have won. I think a scoop and score late in the fourth quarter with 6 minutes left was also part of the Baylor comeback, which, that definitely helps when you get a turnover like that. But, UCF is definitely getting humbled. Do we know when John Reese Plumlee is coming back? Because they got their next two games.
I just heard he's out for a few weeks when he got hurt, so he might be out for another week or two.
They're in trouble because they got at Kansas this week. We're gonna pick that game, by the way. At Kansas, they're not favored in that game for sure. That I like Kansas in that spot, and then they have a bye week, which is good for UCF. Is that they have a bye week after Kansas before they go play at OU, so they can get JRP healthy, and hopefully they kind of get 2 weeks to prepare for OU and catch them off.
I would love for them to snipe OU. I would love for that. So my great situation would be they lose to Kansas, they get humbled a little bit, they're 0-3 in conference play, then they come out, beat OU, ruin OU's like chances to make the playoffs, like all that fun stuff. But anyway, let's keep it in the Big 12. What about the Donovan Smith revenge game? 49-28 Texas Tech, but Donovan Smith played really well. Really, really well. Donovan Smith, 30 for 41, 336 yards, 4 touchdowns, no picks. But they still lost, 49-28.
I didn't get to watch this game, but I saw that Houston was going shot for shot with them in the first half. Tech pulled away in the second half. I mean,
shut them out.
Yeah, I mean, Tech still is the better team, but even without Tyler Shuck, Bayron Morton got some action last year. He's probably the QB of the future for Texas Tech, at least for now, I would say. And I think
he's better than Shuck. I never thought Shuck was that good. Maybe at Oregon he had some flashes, but like in his tech years, I mean, he just has not been good at all when he's been healthy.
I mean, I wish you would talk some sense into us during win totals, because we all were just like, oh, we don't really believe in Shuck, but screw it, we're all going over. So
I wasn't convinced Shuck was going to start. I thought it might be Morton, honestly.
And we still just said, screw it, we're going over, send it. Yeah, hindsight's 2020, but yeah. How about Houston though for a second? Dana Holgorsen, is he going to finish the year as Houston's head coach? Because
they can score points, they just can't play defense.
This is the rest of their schedule. They got West Virginia next week, which West Virginia is
now
looking a lot better. We'll get to them next because they deserve some recognition. Then they got Texas, L.
Loss.
At Kansas State, L.
Loss.
At Baylor, probably an L.
Winnable on the road.
Cincy at home,
winnable,
and Oklahoma State at home. That's probably
their 3 winnables.
That's their most winnable game. Then they finish at UCF.
They've got about 3 or 4 more wins, and they're potential wins.
That's like best case scenarios. They get 3 more wins to me. Like they're not making a bowl game because they're 2-3. They're not making a bowl game.
If it's more games, like if they're non-competitive in these, I think that's when you kind of have to pull the trigger. If you're at least fighting, then I could see keeping them on. But if it's like I'm seeing the TCU game, 36-13, you have a chance. Texas Tech, you lose by 21 points. I mean, if they're just a bunch of blowouts, yeah, I say you cut bait and try to find someone to lead you into this Power 5 era.
Well, speaking of hot seats, but this seat is not hot at all. This seat is probably ice cold, if you're going to ask me. West Virginia, Neil Brown. West Virginia went in and beat TCU 24-21. Like, holy crowd, man. BTB had a best bet TCU minus 11.5 in this one. And
actually, I have I took West Virginia plus 12 in this.
Really?
Good man.
I did. Yeah.
Well, smart man, because they were the better team. And
well, I didn't think they would win, but I thought 12. I'm like, they can cover that. I mean, they've been playing well enough. But yeah.
Like, first of all, good for West Virginia because they haven't had a start like this in a while, I think since the Will Grier years. And
Will Grier, yeah.
Even though, I think this is just, if anything, your success is relative to expectations. And the expectation for West Virginia was probably not going to make a bowl game, and Neil Brown's probably out the door. And we looked at the beginning of West Virginia's schedule and we were like, Penn State, Pitt, Texas Tech, TCU. Oh my God, they might be 1-4. We were saying that. We were like, this team might legitimately be 1-4. Well, flip that damn record. They're 4-1. Like, it's pretty impressive. This is nuts. Like, West Virginia, shout out to them. They get a Shuby snack. Neil Brown gets a Shuby snack. I don't know what else to say. I mean, Garrett Green is playing well on the ground. I mean, he still is not the greatest passer, but they figured it out. They're playing good defense too. Their defense is playing a lot better than anticipated. And I look at the rest of West Virginia's schedule. They still got Houston. They still got Oklahoma State. They still got BYU. They still got Cincy. They still got Baylor. Like, you look at their schedule now and you're like, oh my God, West Virginia could be like an 8-4 team.
Wow.
Very possible. Who would have thought? Who would have
thought? Definitely not us.
No.
Hey, speaking of a team that's really overshooting projections this year, we were all over on this team, but I don't think we thought they'd start 4-1, and that's the BYU Cougs. Taking on and beating Cincinnati 35-27. That is kind of a little, it wasn't that close. I mean, BYU's kind of in control the entire second half. But yeah, really good win, really well-coached team. Keaton Slovis, I watched part of this, was playing really well. And then this receiver they have, Roberts, is really good too. So, yeah, man, BYU, quality squad. And they've got Puka Nasua from last year killing it for the Rams this year.
Yeah.
So they coach their guys up. They coach their guys up. Tyler Algier, I mean, they develop. BYU develops.
They do.
Yeah, we won't hold Zach Wilson against them.
Hey, they got him there. What he does there is on him.
Yeah, and I agree. They got him there.
Cincinnati had 500 yards of total offense in this game, though.
It's because Emory Jones is him.
They turned the ball over twice.
256, 3 tutties. Yeah, with the two turnovers.
I mean, yeah, that I'm raising an eyebrow after that win, but I definitely agree they're better than expected, and they might be able to get to a bowl game.
And plus, Cincinnati got a lot of those yards in the second half, but just couldn't really punch it in as much.
So I'm surprised we're saving this game for last, but Kansas and Texas. This was the ranked matchup of the week. I mean, I guess it went as expected. I think we were on the Texas.
Y'all had the right read.
Kansas held their own.
I didn't think it'd be this lopsided, but
Kansas held their own for the first 60% of this game. And keep in mind, Jalen Daniels didn't play in this game. So he was out, but, Kansas has him in Jason Bean. And if you look at all the quarterbacks overall, he's up there. So Kansas still had a shot in this one to be relatively competitive, and they were for the most part. But Texas just ran it down their throat. 336 rushing yards. I mean, that's the one problem for Kansas is that they still are just not – the defense is still not the greatest. But
we said that in win totals. Kansas probably has the worst D-line in the Big 12 this year going in. And that was they're going to be their Achilles heel. Texas had 661 yards of offense to Kansas's 260. When you're losing in the trenches, it's kind of hard to win games.
But I still think Kansas I like the spots that Kansas has, though, because I look at the rest of their schedule. They got UCF at home next week without Plumlee. So I like their chances in that. Then they get at Oklahoma State, very winnable. Probably should be a win. Then they have a bye week to prepare for Oklahoma, who they have at home. So the Sooners kind of have a couple trap games where they have two teams that are at home against them that both are coming off of bye weeks. I think they could snipe OU if OU is to lose a game or two. I think that could be one of them. Then they got Iowa State, who's bad, on the road. Then they got home games against Texas Tech, Kansas State, and then at Cincinnati. Like I'm thinking 8-4 is on the table for Kansas.
Texas had 33 first downs.
Oh boy.
That's crazy.
But
that is crazy.
You know what? Texas might be the best team in the country. So
they might be.
So let me ask you guys this. Who's the best team in the country right now? And it's okay. This can be a rhetorical question because it is kind of difficult.
There's really no definitive best team in the country right now.
There really isn't.
Texas has a shot to win it this year because of the parity this year. Oregon and Washington have shots to win it this year because of the parity this year. Like it's so wide open that if anyone's going to go in this year and actually win outside of Georgia or Bama, like traditional years have been, it's this year.
So if I was to give an answer to this, I think I would say it's Texas. Like, legitimately, I think it's razor thin margins, of course. But if I had to give a little bit of an edge, it's Texas. Like, they went in and beat Alabama, who I also would throw into that bucket on the road in Tuscaloosa. Like, that is the most definitive win, I would say, that you could point to and be like, okay, that is the best team right now if you had to pick one. Because
OU's
Michigan,
looking pretty good, but I wouldn't put them up there yet. I mean, OU's defense has improved and their offense is killing it too. They're averaging almost 50 points a game.
yeah, they
They beat Iowa State 50-20.
Are you throwing Oklahoma? Are you saying you're
dicey.
throwing OU into that bucket of
Sooners.
one of the best
OU
teams
looks
in the country?
good this year. I would put them as a top 10 team. Yeah, I would put them up there. They look crazy good on offense, and their defense has improved this year for sure.
The Venables effect coming through.
Yeah. Like OU legitimately, it's Texas and OU for the Big 12 this year.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it's even close. Like it's those two teams.
Right now on Sagarin, the top 11 teams are all separated by less than 5 points of power ratings, which you don't see a whole lot in college football. Usually it's like 1, 2, and 3 have like a huge gap between like 4, 5, and 6, and then 4, 5, and 6 have a huge gap between the rest, et cetera, et cetera. Like, it's very layered. This year, there's like legitimately, you look at the power rankings right now. In fact, the top 7 teams are all within 1 point of each other, power ratings wise. That's nuts. Like, this is going to be a great year. Like, there's going to be some top teams losing. But anyhow, you want to wrap this up with some Big Ten. I think we'll finish off the SEC here before we move to G5 and wrap this up. We do have to struggle with time.
Let's just go with some rapid fire for some results, and then any ones that you really want to dive into, we'll dive into them.
So let's just knock out Michigan first. I mean, listen, they beat up on Nebraska 45-7. I'll take the Nebraska angle here first. I feel so bad for Nebraska fans. And, they played Heinrich Harburg at quarterback this week. So, like, they legitimately had no chance in this one from the start. But listen, Matt Rule's first years at Temple and Baylor, they were terrible. So, like, this is nothing that's out of the ordinary for Matt Rule's track record. It's really year two. Year 2 is when I think Nebraska fans need to really pin their ears up and start listening and seeing the improvement. But, I mean, Michigan, to their credit, like, Michigan is beating up on bad teams. That's what you should do. But my God, if you look at Michigan's schedule, it is like Michigan's schedule is like even worse. Like, we knew it was bad going into the year, but now you've seen how the Big Ten has played out. Like, Michigan's schedule is so bad. They're going to be 9-0, and they could play the backups and probably be 9-0. Like, good. It's so bad.
How about a battle of two true Big Ten offenses, Michigan State and Iowa. And Iowa, of course, getting yet another defensive touchdown.
Of course.
I mean, death taxes and Iowa defensive touchdowns.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Noah Kim threw, the lead singer of BDS, he threw 3 interceptions, had 0 touchdown passes, 3 interceptions. Sounds like a standard Iowa game to me.
All right. The rest of the Big Ten games, not really all that enticing.
Well,
Penn
nothing
State
really surprising. Penn
State
State
was
took care of
interesting for
business.
10 minutes, and then they said, okay.
Yeah, then they started trying.
Do we need to mention Purdue, like, smoking Illinois? That was a surprise to me.
Oh, yeah, I forgot. We did that before we started recording. I thought we already talked about that. But yeah, Purdue smoked Illinois, and that gives me some hope for the over that I took.
I mean, I don't know which angle to take on this one here. Obviously, Purdue, like, lit it up, and Illinois has still got a solid defense, but quarterback, again, is a huge issue for Illinois. I mean, Altmaier had a 14 QBR, which is horrendous. I mean, the backup only threw 6 passes, and he had a better QBR. I know sample size, but, like, you get the point there. Like, Altmaier is just not he's not panning out for Illinois offensively. They're really being handicapped by that. And then if you're Purdue, I mean, they put up points and moved the ball pretty efficiently against a pretty good Illini defense. This was a rivalry game. This was Ryan Walters going up against his former team. Remember, he was the DC at Illinois. Like, what do you have to say about this? Because if you're an Illinois fan, you got to be like, holy, this is bad. This is really bad, especially after all the momentum they built last year.
Yeah, Illinois is not a very good team this year, and that's evidenced by how they played against Purdue. But then again, maybe Ryan Walters has the inside scoop on Illinois, though.
That's true.
He did just come from there, so he probably knows everything about their offense, everything about their system, and everything about their players' strengths and weaknesses. So it may just be a matchup that really favored Walters just because he knew so much about the other team.
That is a good point. Well, shout out to Rutgers. They are now 4-1. And I'm sure there's a stat out there about them being probably the first time they're 4-1 in a long time. I'm just going to guesstimate that. Rutgers is going over by October, boys.
Yep.
They are.
They got one more win in the bag. They might have a bowl game in store in Piscataway, New Jersey. Man. Shout out Rutgers. Well, how about we finish off the SEC here? So we already talked about a handful of games. Bama took care of Mississippi State. I was actually surprised that Mississippi State got 17 points on the board against Alabama's defense. That was kind of surprising to me, if anything. Tennessee got a huge revenge game against South Carolina. Granted, Joe Milton wasn't the sharpest in this game. He had 2 interceptions. I wasn't able to watch it. Spencer Rattler threw a pick as well. He didn't have a great day, even though Rattler has actually been objectively pretty solid so far, given that he has like one of the worst offensive lines in the Power 5 in front of him. So I think if you're Tennessee, this is good for you. Tennessee's kind of sort of got back on track here. They wanted this revenge game. And now if you're South Carolina, you're 2-3. I mean, a bowl game is going to be tough. It's going to be pins and needles to get to a bowl game. But if you're Tennessee, I think you're 4-1. You still got your season ahead of you, even though I don't think they're going to finish undefeated or anything like that. But if you're Tennessee, I think you got to be happy about that. Missouri took care of business against Vandy as expected. Missouri very quietly is 5-0. They're now ranked. Welcome to the top 25, Missouri. That over for us is looking solid so far. And then, as you guys mentioned briefly or before, Texas A&M 34-22 over Arkansas on a neutral field, Southwest Classic. Max Johnson, 2 touchdown passes, 1 pick. Max Johnson, I don't think he's that much of a downgrade from Connor Wegman. It's Max Johnson rest of the year. I think that Texas A&M is still like in the hunt. They are in the hunt for the SEC championship.
You know, Petrino and Jimbo marriage is working right now, but let's see now when it gets hard, when bills are due and credit card debts need to be paid when you take on Alabama this weekend. What are you going to say, Zan? Sorry.
Well, I have a little bit of a grudge, a Zanny grudge, aka, my version of a Gonzo grudge with Boise State, man. Just because I went against you guys in picking Boise State, and Boise State was up 17-0. 17-0, and I'm like, man, I got them there. Nope, they lost the game 35-32, and they blew a huge lead. They had to come back to get to 35-32. Like, I don't even know what Boise State was doing, but I looked at that score and I said, got those boys. But nah, man. Yeah, I have a bone to pick with that because that hurts my spread record. That hurts all that. And I started off so well, but I told you guys, regression to the mean, it was due to happen, and here we are.
You and Gonzo are now tied on spread records, I believe, right now, which is, it's been a rough couple of weeks.
I've had 2 rough weeks in a row, yeah.
Yeah, but that was a pretty evenly matched game, I would say, Boise versus Memphis, and I watched tough. A little bit of it. It was a good, solid game. Those are 2 of the better G5 teams, as we mentioned multiple times. Tulane was sleepwalking against UAB, and they didn't
even cover. I thought for sure they would cover that game. I lost money on that.
UAB was up at halftime. Like, they were up 20-14 at half.
I know. As soon as I saw that, I knew, because I think I took Tulane -19 to cover, and I didn't get it.
I mean, shout out to UAB for putting up a fight. I mean, they're 1-4, but I took the UAB's under because I just don't think that
Trent Dilfer.
It's kind of hard to. I mean, did you see that video of him like just completely just tearing his assistant a new one? He tore him a new one. Holy crap! Like, I mean, if you're an assistant, like, would you want to work for him? Like after that, I mean, that was brutal. South Alabama lost to James Madison took care of South Alabama. South Alabama is
Yeah.
now 2-3. A little surprising to me.
That's how bad Oklahoma State is.
Yeah, seriously. James
Great
Madison
win.
is
And,
5-0. Like,
And they're not going to play in the conference championship.
I think we should have taken JMU in the team draft because even though they can't win the conference, like they're just
They
getting
can
points
win.
by winning. They're 5-0. Like, man, it is criminal. It is
How
criminal.
come no one's going to go poach their head coach?
Seriously.
Like what the hell? Like what he's doing with like James Madison? James Madison's not getting like even like high 3 stars right now. So, but
I mean,
anyway,
if you're Virginia,
Troy has a nice bounce back. Crushes Georgia State, who was undefeated, and Georgia State was at home.
Yeah, it seems like our boy Granger came back down to earth, unfortunately. 2 picks, no touchdowns, 193 yards. But I still like his ceiling, though, as a quarterback. And I still think Georgia State is going to have a pretty good season. I mean, you're playing Troy. Defense is their identity. That's a good bounce back for the Trojans.
I mean,
You know whose value has really taken a huge dip this season? Grayson McCall.
Yeah. Oh, my
Threw
God.
4 picks against Georgia Southern. This dude went from being a potential, like, you know, day 1 or day 2 draft pick to being a guy who's probably going to go undrafted.
He was supposed to go to Auburn. Like, that's how this was supposed to play out. Like,
Yeah, but then like something happened with his transfer credits or something. Like his credits at Coastal didn't transfer over for some reason, so he had to stay at Coastal.
that was the worst thing that
Man.
could have happened to him. Personally, I think this is coaching. I think the
Tim Beck
coaching is
ain't
the
it.
issue here. Yeah, Tim Beck
Losing
just ain't it.
Chadwell.
Like we knew that. We knew that. Zan and I graded that as like when we did our head coaching grades, we were like, this is a D, I believe. When we looked at it, we were like, there's nothing special or anything about Tim Beck's track record that suggested he's a good coach. And they hired him somehow. And McCall stayed there. And yeah, I mean, this unfortunately is not that surprising to me. But I think this is sort of like a Tyler Van Dyke situation here. I think this is poor coaching and scheme. But yeah, I think it was a big week for the Sun Belt. I think when we look at the Sun Belt championship race later on in the year, it is. I think if we look back at the Sun Belt championship race, we're going to be looking back at some of these games that happened this past week, and we're going to be like, that was a huge swing game for the conference, head-to-head tiebreakers and all that. So just FYI. How about some Mountain West? Mountain West also is looking good this year. We already mentioned Boise losing to Memphis. Air Force, shout out Air Force. What a great pick, Zan. I might have been a year early on them because they are smoking teams. They're 5-0.
Yeah, Fresno took care of business. Air Force took care of business, and yeah, man, Mountain West has some teams out there. But other than that, any other games you guys really want to talk about? I'm going through here. I'm not really seeing any others that truly stick out.
No, I think we've sprayed the board pretty well, to be honest. Shout out UOL covering versus Minnesota. I was happy about that.
Minnesota's so bad.
Yeah, that was
The Big Ten West is so bad.
Minnesota's the Texas Tech of the Big Ten.
Yep.
Like in terms of expectations versus reality. Yeah, well, I think we have covered the board pretty well, boys. We go pretty deep in depth on these teams, and we got to give the G5 some love towards the end. So thank you guys for listening. Thank you for watching. If you're on YouTube, Week 5 recap is in the books, boys. Again, we're approaching the midway point in the season, and it has been a great one so far. We are starting to really find out who's real and who's not. So, without further ado, that is Gonzo. That is Zan. I am Shub. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. This is the Saturday Scholars signing out. See y'all later. Have a great day.